Hello everyone. Tonight I'll tell you a horror story. July 2015, Denver, United States. A quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing seemed out of place. The main character, David Miller, 22, a college student. He had a backpack filled with research papers, a laptop for his thesis, and a small notebook full of dreams about graduating with honors. He believed the house-sitting job would give him time, peace, and safety. He hoped for focus, not knowing that darkness was already watching. Before we begin, if you enjoy horror stories like this, hit like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? It's amazing to see people around the world sharing this moment together. Now, in just a few seconds, your screen will begin to dim. That's not a glitch. It's designed to protect your eyes from blue light. When your screen dims, your brain will understand it's time to unwind. So, turn off the lights. Let the fan hum softly. Put your headphones on. Let's begin. The first days in the large suburban house seemed ordinary. David's roommate's parents had left for a European trip, leaving him in charge. He followed a simple rhythm: coffee in the morning, thesis work through the afternoon, quiet swims in the evening. Yet by the fourth night, his calm started to fracture. Reading on the couch, he would feel an urge to glance over his shoulder. In the shower, he swore he heard faint movement on the other side of the curtain. He dismissed it as nerves until he noticed something unusual while dusting the fireplace mantel. A family photograph in a thick frame revealed a glint of glass too precise. Inside was a lens no larger than a pinhead. His pulse surged. This was not decoration. This was surveillance. Shaken, he tore through the house. Hidden among vents behind mirrors, tucked into corners, 6 more tiny devices watched every room. Living room, kitchen, his bedroom, even the bathroom, each one wireless feeding images somewhere unknown. He considered calling the police, but how would that sound? A house sitter discovering secret cameras could be mistaken for paranoia. The homeowners might even claim it was for security. Yet the concealment suggested intent darker than simple monitoring. He resolved to act silently, pretending nothing was wrong, keeping routine while preparing to investigate. The next evening, he executed a cover plan. Televisions and radios in every room blasted noise, masking his footsteps. He began a systematic search. Basement first, empty. First floor, ordinary. By the second floor, he was close to giving up when he noticed an attic access panel slightly ajar. Pulling down the folding ladder, he climbed into darkness. The air smelled of dust and mildew. Boxes lined the walls. Then, in a far corner, a faint blue glow pulsed. A laptop rested on a crate connected to several small monitors. Each screen displayed a different room. On one of them, David watched himself standing in the attic, framed by electronic light. The reality sank and the surveillance was live. Someone nearby was watching. The laptop demanded a password, but fragments of browser history remained. His own name appeared in searches, profiles, academic records, personal information. Whoever had planted these cameras was not just watching the house. They were watching him. Then outside, a car door slammed. He lunged to the window. A shadow figure crossed the yard, approaching the front door. Footsteps echoed below. The front door opened with a slow creak. Whoever it was knew he was home. David's heart hammered as heavy steps began climbing the staircase, deliberate and slow. He was trapped. David retreated from the attic ladder, his breath shallow, his mind searching for exits that no longer existed. The master bedroom door stood only a few feet away. He stumbled inside, slammed the lock, and pressed his back against the frame. The old wood shuddered as the intruder tested it. He knew it would not hold. Panic narrowed his vision. He scanned for escape. The window was the only chance. Pulling it open, the cold night air cut his face. Below stretched the sloped roof, and farther down the pool, shimmering under pale light. The door behind him rattled, then thudded with a heavy shoulder strike. Splinters popped from the frame. He swung a leg over the sill, clinging to the edge. The final impact burst the lock. The door flew open. He let go. Sliding down rough shingles, his skin tore, his hands scraped until the gutter bent under his weight and snapped. He dropped into darkness and struck the pool with a crash, the icy water stealing his breath. His lungs burned. For a moment he sank, disoriented, then surfaced coughing. Shouts erupted inside the house. Flashlight beams cut through glass, sweeping across the yard. He pulled himself out, shivering and gasping, stumbling toward the back fence. Muscles screamed as he hauled himself over, just as the back door burst open. beams tracked the lawn searching. He ran blind through yards, over gravel, down alleys, until the neighborhood blurred into a maze. He kept moving until neon lights glowed ahead, a 24-hour diner. Inside, fluorescent light washed over his dripping frame. A waitress dropped her pen, eyes wide. "Honey, are you all right?" she asked, reaching for the phone. He nodded frantically. "Police," he rasped. Officers arrived within minutes, skeptical, until his shaking voice and pale skin forced belief. A unit was dispatched. They confirmed cameras and vents, a surveillance hub in the attic. But of the intruder there was nothing. The homeowners reached overseas, swore ignorance. Investigators promised answers, but David felt none. He abandoned the house, moving into a friend's apartment. Yet silence followed him. Every creak in the hallway, every flicker of a passing car felt like unseen eyes returning. Sleep eluded him. Questions consumed him. Why him? Why so many cameras? What did they want? Each day he stared at blank walls, convinced hidden lenses stared back. Then one night, while scrolling his phone, a new message appeared from an unknown number. The text was short, precise, and suffocating. "I liked the way you ran." His fingers went numb. He dropped the phone as if it were burning. He realized the hunt was not finished. It was only paused. David sat in his friend's apartment 2 nights after leaving the suburban house. Every detail from that escape replayed with unbearable clarity. The flashlight beams cutting through glass, the wood splintering. As the bedroom door burst open, the shock of cold water as he plunged into the pool. Yet none of that compared to the terror of the message that arrived afterward. "I liked the way you ran." Those words clawed at his mind, turning every second into a reminder that someone somewhere was still watching. The police had confirmed what he found: hidden cameras in vents, a surveillance hub in the attic. They took the laptop, the monitors, the hard drives, but the intruder had vanished. No fingerprints, no trace of a vehicle, no witnesses. Official reports used the phrase "under investigation," which to David meant only one thing: waiting in the dark while his stalker kept control. Sleep became impossible. By day he tried to work on his thesis, but every sound made his pulse accelerate. By night every red indicator light became an eye staring back at him. His friend suggested therapy, called it trauma. But David knew better. The sensation of being observed was not paranoia, it was continuity. A week later, another message arrived. This time, not from an unknown number, but through a social media account that only close friends knew. The text read, "Coffee tastes better when you add 2 sugars, right?" His chest tightened. That morning in the kitchen, he had stirred exactly 2 spoonfuls into his mug. Someone had been there. Someone was close enough to see. He could no longer stay in borrowed apartments. He moved into a cheap motel on the edge of town, using a false name, paying in cash. Each night he inspected the room with obsessive precision, removing smoke detectors, covering laptop cameras, taping over mirrors. Safety felt like an illusion, fragile and temporary. On the 3rd night, returning from a convenience store, he found an envelope on the bedside table. The clerk swore no one had entered. Inside was a printed photograph, David sleeping in that very bed. The room spun. He gagged, his stomach twisting. The locks had been engaged, no forced entry marks. That meant only one possibility: whoever was watching had a key or had been in the room before he returned. Written across the back of the photo in shaky ink were 2 words: "Still watching." Terror pushed him past reason. He left the motel immediately, hauling his bag into the car, driving without direction. The clock read 2:00 a.m. The road was empty, except for the echo of his tires. His hands trembled on the wheel, sweat pooling in his palms. He was no longer a student finishing a thesis. He was prey in a game he did not understand. Streetlights flickered by sparse and uneven. The highway opened, stretching into endless black. Then his rearview mirror filled with light. Headlamps appeared distant at first, then closer, aligning perfectly with his lane. He accelerated. The lights did the same. His heart constricted. Each glance in the mirror showed them following, never passing, never falling back. He changed lanes. The vehicle mirrored him. He slowed. They slowed. He pressed harder on the gas pedal, his old car vibrating with the strain, but the lights maintained their distance, locked onto him like eyes in the dark. He understood now with devastating certainty: the one who had broken into the house, the one who left the photo, the one who wrote those words, was right behind him. There was nowhere left to hide. The headlights behind David clung to his car like a predator stalking prey. Each mile marker passed with agonizing slowness, his grip on the steering wheel tightening until his knuckles whitened. The highway stretched ahead, deserted the asphalt, glistening under thin patches of moonlight. His old sedan shuddered as he pushed the speedometer higher. Still, the lights refused to shrink. He considered pulling off at the next exit, but the ramps ahead only led deeper into rural darkness. Gas stations were miles away. He realized the stalker had planned this force him into isolation, a moving cage on an empty road. His phone displayed no service, no call for help, no chance to alert police. He was alone. The car behind shifted lanes, sliding alongside his rear quarter panel. For one long, sickening moment, the dark outline hovered next to him. He risked a glance. A figure sat behind the wheel, face obscured by shadows, but the posture radiated patience and control. Then, with deliberate motion, the vehicle swerved toward him. David jerked his wheel tires, screaming as he swerved back into his lane. The pursuing car fell behind, then accelerated once more. He realized this wasn't an idle threat. They were testing his reactions, studying how he moved. Like a hunter gauging the endurance of its target, his thoughts scattered between survival options. Should he brake hard, force them to overshoot? Should he veer off the road entirely, vanish into the trees? Every choice carried the risk of death. He forced his gaze forward, lungs pulling ragged air, heart pounding in chaotic rhythm. Minutes bled into eternity, until finally up ahead he saw a faint glow, neon signs flickering above a rest stop. Hope surged. Civilization meant witnesses. Civilization meant safety. He floored the accelerator, praying the car would hold together. The headlights closed in bright beams, flooding his mirrors, blinding him. He swerved again, tires nearly losing grip. The pursuing vehicle blared its horn, a long guttural sound that vibrated through his bones. The rest stop loomed closer. He aimed for the exit ramp, but at the last second, the pursuing car cut across, blocking the lane. He slammed the brakes, tires screeching, steering wheel jerking violently. His car fishtailed, barely avoiding collision. He wrestled the vehicle back under control, lungs burning with panic. The rest stop disappeared in his mirror. The chance was gone. Now the hunter had revealed its intent. It wasn't just following, it was hurting. David stayed in the center lane, speed erratic. His eyes darted across the mirrors. The other car pulled back slightly, its beams still flooding his interior. He wondered how long they could keep this game alive. Hours, all night. He realized fatigue was part of the plan. Exhaustion would slow his reflexes, make mistakes inevitable. A sudden movement snapped his attention forward. The vehicle accelerated sharply, pulling alongside once more. This time, the driver rolled down the window. The figure leaned out, face obscured by a hood, but one detail caught David's eye, a handheld device, small metallic, its red light blinking. A camera. The stalker wasn't only pursuing him, they were recording him. He pressed harder on the gas, desperate. His car rattled, engine screaming. Ahead, the highway narrowed into a construction zone, cones lined in jagged rows. He swerved narrowly, avoiding the barriers. The pursuing vehicle followed effortlessly, weaving with practiced skill. The road curved sharply. David's headlights illuminated a reflective sign, bridge crossing, one lane ahead. His heart lurched. One lane meant confrontation. He had seconds to decide, yield or force his way through. His mind screamed at him to survive, but another thought pierced through. If he yielded, he would be at their mercy. The bridge rose ahead, its guardrails casting skeletal shadows. He kept his foot down, refusing to surrender. The other car did the same. Both vehicles roared toward the narrowing space, metal shells hurtling toward collision. David clenched the wheel, every muscle tense. Impact was seconds away. The bridge loomed ahead, steel guardrails, funneling the road into a narrow throat of concrete. David gritted his teeth and held his line. The other vehicle surged forward, engine growling, lights blazing the gap between them, shrinking until he could almost feel its heat pressing through the glass. For an instant, the two cars were side by side, one lane dissolving into confrontation. The sound of twisted metal rang out as the pursuer clipped his rear fender. His sedan shuddered violently, veering toward the guardrail. David yanked the wheel tires, shrieking in protest, sparks flying as steel kissed steel. The bridge vibrated beneath him, the river below, a black void waiting to swallow. Adrenaline flooded his veins, narrowing the world to instinct. He pressed deeper into the accelerator. The pursuing driver adjusted with eerie precision. Their headlights fixed, their posture calm, as if rehearsed countless times before. David realized with a sickening lurch that this wasn't their first hunt. Whoever they were, they had done this before. He was not the first target. He might not be the last. Wind hammered against his windows, the tunnel of the bridge amplifying every sound. His own breathing was ragged, chest heaving with desperate gulps of air. He forced his car ahead, inch by inch, bumper straining toward freedom. The pursuer swerved again, pressing him closer to the guardrail. His side mirror exploded in shards of glass, scattering like dark rain into the void. The bridge stretched longer than he remembered, endless steel bones crossing endless water. He wondered if it would ever end. The pursuing driver honked once, the sound long distorted, vibrating through his spine. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement. A reminder that this was a game. David spotted a break ahead, an emergency shoulder carved into the side of the bridge, barely wide enough for one car. With a snap decision, he yanked the wheel and swerved into it. His sedan slammed against the concrete barrier, metal grinding momentum, screeching to a halt. The pursuer shot forward past him, their headlights slicing through the night. For a moment, David thought he had escaped. Then the brake lights of the other car flared red. The vehicle slowed, stopped in the middle of the bridge. Silence thickened as its driver's door creaked open. A figure emerged, tall, thin, hood pulled low, silhouetted against the beams of passing headlights. They turned, staring directly back at him, though distance and shadow concealed the face. Even so, David felt the weight of the gaze pierce through the glass, settling like a cold blade against his skin. The figure raised something in their hand, a small device with a blinking red light. The camera again. They recorded his still frame, trapped in the emergency lane, breathing hard, car dented and trembling. Then, without a word, they climbed back into their vehicle. The engine roared. The car accelerated, vanishing into the distance. David remained, frozen lungs, burning hands welded to the wheel. His heart slammed against his ribs, unable to accept the sudden absence of threat. He waited 5 minutes. Then 10. The bridge lay empty. The night pressed in. The hunter was gone, or had only retreated. He forced his car back into motion, wheels protesting against the bent frame. The highway stretched onward, barren, silent, without witnesses. Each mile carried him farther, yet no closer to safety. He knew this was not finished. They had let him live deliberately, recorded him deliberately. The thought tore through him like ice. This wasn't pursuit. It was documentation. The twisted frame of David's sedan rattled with every mile, its groans echoing his own exhaustion. The bridge was behind him, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the pursuit itself. He knew what had just occurred was no accident. The collision, the forced lane, the recording device, it was choreography. Someone had scripted every moment, and he had played his part without consent. At the next exit, he veered off the highway. The ramp led into a deserted stretch of service road lit by failing sodium lamps that flickered and buzzed against the stillness. He pulled into an abandoned gas station lot, the cracked pavement sprouting weeds, the windows boarded with rotting plywood. Shutting off the engine, he let the silence close in. His chest rose and fell in violent rhythm, muscles trembling with aftershock. He checked his phone, still no signal. The digital clock glowed 3:12 a.m. He realized how much time had been consumed by the chase. Hours had vanished into adrenaline. He closed his eyes, hoping for a moment's peace, but the after-images remained, headlights swelling in mirrors, the sound of tires screaming against steel, the faceless figure holding a camera. His mind circled one conclusion. This was not surveillance for the sake of theft, nor intimidation for revenge. It was collection. Every escape, every expression of panic, every desperate decision was being documented. He was not merely hunted, he was being archived. The memory of the envelope at the motel sharpened the realization. That photo of him asleep was not random cruelty. It was evidence. Whoever orchestrated this wanted proof of control, a growing catalog of his existence. He was not a victim of chance. He was a project. David forced himself to move. He restarted the engine, the battered car coughing against the strain. He needed people, light witnesses, civilization. He drove toward the glow of a distant sign, the letters of a 24-hour diner shimmering through the dark. He parked crookedly, stumbled inside. The waitress behind the counter froze at the sight of his bloodied hands, torn clothes, and vacant stare. "Rough night?" she asked softly, already reaching for the phone. He nodded, words failing. Police arrived again, questions spilling across the fluorescent booth where he sat shaking. He told them about the chase, the figure on the bridge, the camera. Officers exchanged looks, skeptical, but his damaged car stood as proof of contact. They filed a report, promised to increase patrols, and left him with paperwork that felt like nothing more than a formality. When the diner emptied before dawn, David remained. The waitress refilled his coffee, pity shadowing her face. He clung to the warmth of the mug, though its comfort dissolved quickly. On the counter beside it, someone had left a folded slip of paper. He hadn't seen who placed it there. Hands shaking, he opened it. Inside, a grainy photograph showed him at that exact booth minutes earlier, holding the same mug. Across the bottom, written in black marker, "Nice choice. 2 sugars again." The coffee slipped from his grip, shattering across the floor. The waitress gasped, rushing to grab towels, unaware of the true reason his skin had turned pale. He scanned the diner windows, searching the parking lot beyond. Cars idled under the neon light, their windshields, black mirrors hiding endless possibilities. Somewhere behind one of those panes of glass, a lens stared back. The coffee pooled across the diner tiles, spreading like a dark stain under David's shoes. The waitress apologized for the mess, unaware of the real cause of his trembling hands. He bent to pick up the note again, eyes scanning the photograph. The perspective was impossible, taken from an angle behind the counter, though he had seen no camera there. The grain was coarse, the light harsh, yet the accuracy was undeniable. Every crease in his shirt, every detail of his posture captured within minutes of the shutter's click. He looked up. Neon lights hummed overhead, their glow reflecting against the diner's wide glass windows. Outside the parking lot was a graveyard of still cars. A pickup truck idled with its headlights off. A minivan sat crooked, its windshield fogged. In each reflection, he saw himself staring back, layered and fractured, as though the entire lot was filled with mirrors pointed at him. His body urged him to run, but his mind calculated. Running now would only add another image to their archive. He forced himself to remain, to breathe slowly, to study his environment, as if he were the observer instead of the observed. He knew the truth. Someone was out there, not just one person, but possibly more. The chase on the bridge, the envelope at the motel, the slip of paper at the diner, all required coordination. No single stalker could be in all those places at once. The waitress returned with a towel, crouching near the table. "You all right, honey? You're white as a sheet." He swallowed. "Did anyone come near this booth? Anyone besides you?" She frowned. "Just the officer who took your statement." "Why?" David shook his head, unable to explain. If the intruders had infiltrated this far, even the uniform of authority could be part of their disguise. He stood quickly, muttered a thank you, and left a few bills on the table. The bell over the diner door chimed as he stepped into the night. The air outside was sharp, the kind that scraped the lungs raw. His car sat dented and broken under the buzzing street lamp, paint scraped along one side, mirror missing. For a long moment, he considered abandoning it, walking down the empty road until sunrise. But distance meant nothing to those who tracked him. They had followed from attic to highway, from motel to diner. They would follow again. He slid into the driver's seat, the cracked vinyl cold against his skin. In the passenger seat rested another envelope. His stomach dropped. He had checked the car before entering the diner. There had been nothing. He tore it open with numb fingers. Inside was a photograph of the waitress. The angle was from behind the counter, exactly where she had stood. Across the bottom, a message: "She won't remember you, but we will." David crumpled the photo, panic boiling into nausea. He threw the car into gear, accelerating out of the lot, headlights carving through the empty road. He drove without aim, past shuttered gas stations, past endless darkened storefronts, until exhaustion blurred the edges of the highway. Every mirror became a trap, every shadow a figure leaning forward with a lens. He realized something with chilling certainty: this was not random selection. They hadn't just stumbled on him. They had chosen him, studied him, and surrounded him with a network of watchers. The cameras in the house had been the beginning. The chase on the bridge had been a performance. The photographs were a ledger. He was no longer living freely. He was part of someone's experiment. At 4:27 a.m., his gas gauge hovered near empty. He pulled onto a narrow road, following signs toward a small town he didn't recognize. The streets were deserted, houses dark, the only sound the distant hum of power lines. He found a motel with a flickering vacancy sign. Against every instinct, he stopped. His body demanded rest, even if his mind screamed that no rest would come. Inside the office, the clerk barely looked up, sliding a key across the counter. The metal tag read, "Room 6. David forced a polite smile, pocketed the key, and carried his bag down the cracked walkway. The lock clicked open with too much ease, as though the door had been prepared for him. The room smelled of mildew and stale air. He checked corners, bathroom, closet, nothing visible. Finally, he sank onto the bed, staring at the ceiling, exhaustion pulling him under. Sleep came in fragments broken by distant noises, the rumble of a truck on the highway, the creak of wood settling, the whisper of wind against the window. Then sometime before dawn, a sharper sound reached him. A soft click, metallic and precise like the shutter of a camera. His eyes snapped open. David's pulse hammered as he sat upright, eyes sweeping the dark motel room. The sound had been unmistakable, clean, mechanical, the intimate snap of a shutter. His breath fogged in the chill air as he scanned the shadows. The clock glowed 5:02 a.m. No movement stirred. Yet the silence was no reassurance. He rose slowly, every joint stiff with exhaustion. Crossing the room, he checked the window latch, then the bathroom, then the closet again. Empty. He dropped to the carpet, searching beneath the bed. Nothing but dust and a forgotten shoe. Yet when he stood, another sound pricked his ears. Not a shudder this time, a faint electronic hum, constant, alive. He traced it to the smoke detector. A small red dot blinked faintly within the plastic casing. His hand trembled as he reached up, twisted the cover free. Inside, nestled where a sensor should have been sat, a tiny lens wired to a transmitter no larger than a coin. His throat tightened. The camera had been here long before he arrived. He ripped it down, crushing the plastic underfoot. The silence that followed felt like victory for half a breath, then terror. If they were watching live, they had seen his discovery. They knew he was aware. The game had advanced. Grabbing his bag, he fled the room, footsteps echoing along the cracked walkway. The clerk behind the office glass looked up in confusion as David strode past, but David didn't stop. He shoved his belongings into the trunk and roared out of the lot, gravel scattering under the tires. The sky lightened with dawn as he drove aimlessly through unfamiliar streets. The town seemed deserted, every house shuttered, every storefront vacant. He wondered if it was coincidence, or if the watchers had steered him here deliberately. Each road fed into another, looping back toward the center, as though escape had been designed out of the geography. His gas tank neared empty again. He stopped at a lonely station, pumps worn and rusted. As he filled the tank, he noticed a poster taped to the window of the convenience store. It was sun-faded, the paper curling at the edges. At first glance, it looked like any missing person flyer, but as he approached, his stomach lurched. The photograph was grainy, poorly lit, but the subject was clear. It was him. The text beneath the photo was minimal. Information needed. Last seen outside town. Contact authorities immediately. There was no date, no phone number, no agency listed. Just the image of his face staring back at him with hollow eyes. He staggered back, scanning the empty street. No cars passed, no pedestrians walked. The whole town seemed to breathe with invisible lungs. He hurried into his car and sped away, abandoning the half-filled pump. Each mile of cracked pavement confirmed what he already knew. He was trapped in a constructed perimeter. Whoever hunted him had resources beyond imagination: cameras in houses, watchers on highways, false posters in forgotten towns. He had stumbled into something larger than obsession. It was infrastructure. By late morning, he reached a crossroads. One path led deeper into forested hills, the other toward industrial ruins, smokestacks, long-dead warehouses collapsed. With no reason to trust either, he chose the ruins. He parked beside a chain-link fence, rusted and gaping. The silence here was heavier, broken only by crows circling above. He slipped through the gap, drawn by the faint sound of dripping water echoing through concrete. Inside, rows of empty rooms stretched into shadow. It was in the third room that he saw at a table battered and stained with a laptop open upon it. The screen glowed faintly, though no power cables ran. Lines of video thumbnails filled the display, each one labeled with a name and a date. Some faces he recognized from news reports, missing persons who had never been found. Others were strangers. At the bottom of the list, fresh and stark, was his own name. David reached for the laptop, but before his hand touched the keys, the speakers crackled. A voice, distorted yet calm, filled the room. "You run well, but you are not the first, and you will not be the last." The distorted voice leaked from the laptop speakers, each syllable echoing across the hollow chamber. David froze, his pulse thundering in his ears. The voice was steady, confident, neither hurried nor angry. It carried the cadence of someone who believed they were in complete control. He leaned closer to the screen. The thumbnails glowed in neat rows, dozens of frozen faces staring back. Some were blurred, captured mid-motion. Others showed sleeping figures, their features exposed under soft lamplight. He scrolled upward, fingers trembling, dates stretched back years. Victims cataloged, organized, curated like specimens in a vault. At the bottom, his own file waited. He clicked. The screen filled with images, him entering the suburban house for the first time, him writing at the kitchen table, him swimming in the pool, unaware of the lens hidden in the hedges. Then came the attic, his pale face lit by the glow of monitors. Next, the motel bed, his form curled under a blanket. Finally, grainy footage from the bridge, his car boxed in headlights, glaring, his expression frozen in panic. David staggered back. His entire descent had been documented with surgical precision. The realization settled like ice in his gut. Every move he thought was instinct had been anticipated. Every choice had been engineered. The voice returned. Observation defines existence. You are what we record. Without the lens, you are nothing. He slammed the laptop shut. The silence that followed was worse than the voice. It pressed on him from every corner, the ruined shadows crowding closer. He spun toward the exit, ready to flee, when another sound halted him. A footstep, then another. Slow, deliberate, from the hall behind. David darted through a doorway into a narrower passage. Rust flakes crumbled under his shoes, the air thick with dust. The footsteps followed, steady and patient, never hurried. He turned left, then right, weaving through collapsed rooms and broken walls. Each turn only deepened the labyrinth. Finally, he stumbled into a chamber where light spilled from a fractured roof. At the center stood rows of crates, unmarked, stacked with military precision. Inside lay coiled wires, small cameras identical to those he had found in the house. Another crate held transmitters, compact and professional. The scale of the operation loomed. This was no single stalker, no lone predator. This was industry. The footsteps grew louder. He grabbed a length of rusted pipe from the ground, clutching it as a weapon. Shadows shifted at the edge of the chamber. A figure emerged, tall and cloaked in dark fabric. The hood concealed the face, but in the crook of their arm rested a camera, its red light blinking. The lens pointed directly at him. David raised the pipe. His hands shook, sweat streaking his palms. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice cracking. The figure tilted its head, silent. Then with precise motion they raised a second device from their coat, a speaker. The same distorted voice bled out perfectly, synchronized with their stillness. "You are part of us now. Resistance is documentation too." David's throat closed. His instincts screamed to attack, to swing the pipe until the lens shattered, but something inside him hesitated. If he struck, it would be filmed. Another entry, another recording to be cataloged. He realized there was no victory here, only footage. The figure stepped closer, lens unwavering. David backed away until his shoulders hit the cold wall. The camera blinked once, twice, then the red light dimmed. The figure lowered the device and retreated into the shadows without a word. Silence reclaimed the chamber. David remained pinned against the wall, pipe still clutched, heart still convulsing. He realized the withdrawal was intentional. They could have taken him. They chose not to. This was permission, not mercy. A reminder that escape was irrelevant. He was alive only because they required more film. Above him, daylight pierced through the broken roof, casting jagged light across the crates. Dust drifted in thin spirals, catching in the glow. He dropped the pipe, its clang echoing like a gavel. His body ached with fatigue, his mind spinning in frantic loops. Somewhere far away, another shutter clicked. David stumbled from the chamber, leaving the crates and the blinking lens behind. The pipe he had dropped still echoed in his head, a hollow clang replaying with every heartbeat. Dust clung to his clothes, his lungs raw from the air. He pushed through the broken corridors of the ruin, searching for daylight, desperate for anything resembling escape. The silence pressed heavier with every step. No more footsteps followed, no more distorted voice, yet absence did not feel like relief. It felt like permission again, as though he had been released on purpose, guided into the next stage of some script already written. He reached the torn fence where he had first entered. His car still sat by the road, dented frame gleaming faintly in the gray morning. He hesitated, scanning the perimeter. The street was empty, no traffic, no pedestrians. Still he knew unseen eyes lingered. He climbed into the car, turned the key, and the engine groaned reluctantly to life. Driving through the hollow streets, he noticed patterns. At each corner, the same white sedan idled, its driver hidden behind tinted glass, not chasing, just present. At a crosswalk, a man stood perfectly still, holding a phone, not to his ear but angled toward David's windshield. Outside a shuttered grocery store, a child's bicycle rested upright, its handlebars equipped with a tiny blinking red dot. The town itself had become a surveillance device. Every object, every bystander, every fragment of scenery was part of the net. He realized there would be no simple escape. The Watchers had built an environment, a living stage. He was the only actor unaware of the script. He pressed the accelerator, tires hissing across cracked pavement. He drove until the town gave way to forested hills, dense pines closing in on both sides. The air-cooled shadows thickening between the trees. For a fleeting moment, he thought distance might matter. Perhaps outside the perimeter, the Watchers lost control. Then his phone buzzed. No signal indicator had returned yet. A new message glowed on the screen. No number attached, just text. You left your performance too early. Turn back. His grip tightened, knuckles white on the wheel. He ignored the command, speeding deeper into the forest. Branches arched over the road, forming a tunnel of green and shadow. The farther he drove, the narrower the road became until gravel replaced asphalt. His tires kicked up dust, clouding the mirror. A clearing opened suddenly. At its center stood another car parked diagonally across the road, blocking passage. Its headlights were off, doors closed, windows black. David slammed the brakes, his car skidding to a halt mere feet away. Dust rose around him, swallowing both vehicles in a haze. He waited, chest-heaving eyes locked on the silent car. Seconds stretched. Finally, the driver's door opened. A figure stepped out, tall, hooded, posture calm. In their hand hung a camera lens already aimed. David reversed violently, tires spinning on loose gravel. His car fishtailed, barely regaining grip as he swerved back toward the forest road. Branches clawed at the roof and mirrors. Behind him, the blocked car remained its driver, unmoving, camera raised, capturing his frantic retreat. He drove for miles, lungs burning, until he found another sign of habitation. A trailhead parking lot empty except for a single rusted vehicle. He parked crookedly, slammed the door, and ran down the nearest path into the trees. His instincts screamed that the Watchers owned the roads. Perhaps the forest, untamed and irregular, could break their net. The trail twisted downward, leading toward a river. The air smelled damp, heavy with moss and decay. Birds erupted from branches as he passed, their wings scattering fragments of silence. His shoes slipped on wet stone, knees buckling, but he pressed forward. Every sound became pursuit, the crunch of leaves, the crack of twigs, the hiss of wind. He paused at the riverbank, chest, heaving, sweat cold on his neck. He bent low, splashed water onto his face, desperate to wash away the heat of panic. For a moment, the flow of the river drowned the hum of his thoughts. He almost believed he had outpaced them. Then across the water, movement stirred. A figure stood on the opposite bank, half hidden among trees. Hood pulled low, camera, raised lens unblinking. David staggered back, his shoes sinking into mud. Another figure emerged beside the first, then a third, all silent, all recording. The river was wide, but not wide enough. The river roared between David and the silent figures, its current frothing white against jagged rocks. He counted 3 Watchers, each motionless, each holding a camera fixed on him. Their stillness unsettled him more than pursuit. Predators usually moved. These simply documented, as if the outcome were already decided. David's mind split into calculations. The river was dangerous, swift, cold, unpredictable, but behind him lay only the trail. He had taken a narrow path that could funnel him back toward the waiting car on the road. He realized the design forward meant drowning, backward meant capture. Either way, it would be recorded. He inhaled sharply and chose motion over paralysis. He stepped into the river, icy water, biting through fabric instantly. Stones shifted under his shoes. He pressed forward, arms out for balance, each surge threatening to tear him downstream. His teeth clenched against the cold. Across the water, the Watchers adjusted their lenses, following each unsteady step. Halfway across, the current seized him. His knees buckled. Water rose to his chest, then to his throat. He gasped, flailing, lungs burning as the torrent shoved him sideways. He fought upward, fingers clawing for air, until his hands struck a fallen branch. He clutched it, dragging himself toward a jut of rock. He emerged coughing violently, the world spinning in spray and foam. When his vision cleared, he glanced across. The Watchers were gone. The bank stood empty, branches swaying gently as though nothing had disturbed them. His relief was short-lived. A sharp click reached his ears, familiar, intimate. He turned his head. On his side of the river, a figure waited atop the rock's lens, angled down at him. Hood's dark face obscured the red light, blinked in steady rhythm. David scrambled away from the water, climbing onto the mud bank, slipping, tearing his palms on stone. The figure did not follow. It merely filmed, silent, patient. He bolted into the forest, branches slapping against his face, lungs searing. the wood's thickened canopy strangling light ground twisting unevenly. He sprinted until his legs failed, collapsing against a fallen trunk. He listened, ears straining. No footsteps, no pursuit. Only the buzz of insects and the rustle of leaves. Minutes dragged. He dared to believe he had gained distance, though instinct argued otherwise. He rose unsteadily, trudging deeper until he found a clearing. In its center stood a small cabin, wood-rotten windows broken, relief mixed with dread. He entered cautiously, floorboards groaning under his weight. The interior was bare except for a table and scattered chairs. Dust coated every surface. He exhaled, shoulders loosening when he noticed the marks. Along the walls carved into the timber, dozens of tally marks ran in uneven rows. Sets of 5, scratched deep, some fresh, some faded. A record of days, or people. On the table lay a single object, another photograph. His heart lurched as he picked it up. It showed him in the river moments earlier, arms flailing, mouth open in a silent cry. The angle was high, impossible, unless taken from directly above. He staggered back, breath shallow, realizing the watchers had access to views no human could reach. A noise behind him made him spin. The doorway stood empty, but shadows shifted along the floor, long and thin, stretching toward him, though no figure cast them. The air chilled. The red blink of a camera light pulsed once in the corner, then vanished. David's mind fractured between options: run deeper into the forest or hold inside the cabin. Either way, the watchers would already know his choice. He clenched the photo in his fist, sweat smearing the image, teeth grinding. He whispered to himself, barely audible, "You want documentation, watch this." He hurled the chair against the wall, splintering wood, forcing his body into movement. He stormed out into the clearing, lungs pulling ragged air, ready to flee into the trees. But at the edge of the clearing, lined shoulder to shoulder, more figures waited. 5, then 6. Each one lifted a camera in perfect unison, lenses catching the weak daylight, recording every twitch of his defiance. The clearing held a silence so heavy it seemed to crush the air from David's lungs. 6 figures stood aligned at the tree-lined cameras, raised lenses glinting in fractured daylight. No words, no movement beyond the blink of tiny red lights. He felt pinned beneath their collective gaze like an insect pinned to a specimen board. Instinct screamed to run. He bolted toward the opposite side of the clearing, legs pounding, breath ragged. The figures did not follow immediately. Instead, shutters clicked in rapid bursts, the rhythm chasing him faster than footsteps. By the time he plunged into the undergrowth, the sound still rang in his ears. Branches clawed his arms, roots tripped his stride, mud sucked at his shoes. He forced his way deeper, lungs searing every nerve raw. Then footsteps synchronized, spreading through the forest in a semicircle. They weren't chasing blindly, they were herding. David veered downhill, sliding on loose soil, catching himself against bark. The woods narrowed into a ravine, jagged walls rising on both sides. He realized too late it was a funnel. At the end, shadows moved. Another figure stood waiting, camera raised. He skidded to a halt, chest heaving. The figure didn't advance, only tilted the lens, ensuring the recording caught his hesitation. Behind him, more footsteps closed in. He scrambled upward, claws of stone tearing his palms as he climbed the ravine wall. At the top, he collapsed onto moss, gasping, blood streaking his skin. The forest fell quiet again. He dragged himself forward, each step deliberate, knowing the cameras could appear anywhere. Hours blurred, hunger gnawed, thirst scraped his throat. At last he stumbled upon another structure half hidden by ivy, an abandoned ranger station, windows shattered, roof caved in on one side. He pushed inside. The air smelled of mold and rust. Maps curled on the walls, their ink faded. A desk lay overturned, drawers gutted. Yet one object sat neatly atop the surface, a radio, its casing dusty, its antenna bent. He turned the knob. Static hissed, then cleared. A voice seeped through, low and calm. "You are doing well, David. Better than most." His body froze. The voice wasn't distorted this time. It was clear, almost soothing, the tone of someone familiar with his breathing patterns. "Why me?" His voice cracked, throat raw. The reply came without pause. "Because you run, and we need runners." The radio clicked off, leaving only static. He hurled it against the wall, fragments scattering, yet the static persisted in his ears, as though his skull itself transmitted the signal. He pressed hands to his face, trembling. Through a broken window, he saw movement. Figures gathering at the tree line again. More this time, 8, maybe 9. Their lenses glowed like embers in the gloom. David stumbled back, mind screaming. He pushed through a rear door into tall grass, sprinting without direction, every breath like glass in his lungs. His body broke branches, tore through brambles, leaving a trail impossible to hide. He knew they wanted the trail. Documentation required evidence. The ground sloped downward again, and suddenly he emerged at another river narrower than before. A rickety suspension bridge stretched across boards, missing ropes frayed. On the far side, two more figures waited, cameras steady. Behind him, the grass shivered with advancing forms. He stepped onto the first board. It groaned, swayed. He clutched the rope, forcing one foot ahead of the other. Halfway across the bridge, convulsed. A board snapped. He dropped to his knees, clinging heart hammering. Shutters clicked from both banks, capturing his suspended terror. Above, vultures circled lazily, as though the ending had already been decided. The suspension bridge swayed violently under David's weight, ropes creaking, boards snapping with each tremor. He pressed his chest low against the planks, clinging to frayed cords, eyes locked on the far bank where two figures waited, cameras raised. Behind him, movement churned in the grass, more watchers approaching with mechanical patience. He realized he was suspended not only over the river, but over the certainty of being recorded no matter which way he turned. He forced himself forward, palms raw against splinters, knees bruising with every shuffle. The current below roared black and merciless, carrying fragments of broken wood downstream. The bridge jolted again, a board dislodging beneath his thigh, plunging into the water. Shutters clicked from the riverbank, freezing his desperation frame by frame. Midway across, his strength faltered. He gripped the rope tightly, sweat blinding his eyes. Panic surged as his legs threatened to buckle. He could let go, surrender to the water, or continue toward the inevitable lenses. Either choice was theirs to document. He whispered through clenched teeth, "Not for you." Not all of it. Summoning the last of his resolve, he lunged forward, crawling across missing planks, pulling with sheer will. The bridge groaned, ropes, unraveling, each fiber snapping like bones breaking. At last, his fingers scraped the opposite platform. He hauled himself up, chest heaving, mud caking his clothes. The two figures standing there did not move. Their lenses followed, his crawl steady, unhurried. They stepped aside in unison, parting like curtains, revealing a narrow path into deeper forest. It was invitation disguised as escape. David staggered past them, refusing to meet the glass eyes. He pressed into the trees, lungs burning, mind fractured. His thoughts looped on the same realization: they didn't need to capture him. They needed to film him, choosing survival again and again, until he broke. Hours blurred as he stumbled forward, guided by instinct alone. Hunger gnawed deeper, his throat parched, his muscles cramping. Still he moved. Eventually the forest thinned, revealing an open field. At its center, a farmhouse leaned against time, paint peeling, windows dark. A windmill spun lazily, squealing with rust. He approached cautiously, every nerve on edge. The porch creaked under his weight. He pressed the door, it opened without resistance. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and dust. Furniture remained, but draped in sheets, as though abandoned hastily. On the dining table lay an object that froze his breath, another laptop screen already awake. He stepped closer. The display showed live footage, him from above, standing in the farmhouse. The angle matched the ceiling. He looked up. A small lens blinked from the rafters. Another captured his profile from the corner. A third aimed at his hands. He spun in panic. Every room contained hidden lenses, all transmitting to the screen. He lunged toward the laptop, intent on smashing it, but a new window opened automatically. A video began. The image showed the same farmhouse years earlier. A different man sat at the same table, trembling, exhausted. His eyes darted to corners, mirroring David's exact fear. The man shouted something unheard, then bolted for the door. Figures emerged outside, surrounding him, cameras raised. The footage ended abruptly, cutting back to David's live feed. His knees weakened. Others had been here. Others had failed. The farmhouse was not refuge. It was stage. The upstairs floor groaned. He froze. Someone else was here now. A shadow stretched across the stairwell, elongated by failing light. A slow, deliberate step descended, wood sighing under its weight. David's breath caught in his throat as the shape moved closer. The stairwell groaned as weight pressed downward, each step slow, deliberate, echoing through the hollow farmhouse. David crouched behind the dining table, heart-racing eyes, locked on the shadows, stretching across the warped floorboards. The shape elongated, with each step bending unnaturally under the fractured light seeping through the boarded windows. The figure emerged, hooded, tall, camera raised. Its lens reflected the faint glow of the laptop screen, turning into a glassy red eye. David gripped the edge of the table, every instinct demanding flight, but his legs trembled with exhaustion. He forced himself upright, clutching a chair as a weapon. The figure stopped midway down the stairs. It tilted the camera, focusing on his defiance. The red light blinked twice, steady and calm. Then to his horror, another figure appeared behind the first, then another. They descended slowly, one after another, until 5 stood on the staircase, each with a camera fixed directly on him. The air thickened, pressing into his chest. Their silence was worse than threats. It implied inevitability, the certainty that his choices were only variations in their footage. He swung the chair, smashing it against the table. Wood splintered fragments scattering across the room. The cameras clicked in unison, shutters capturing every shard. He bolted toward the kitchen feet, slipping on warped linoleum. Drawers hung open, rusted cutlery scattered across the counter. He seized a knife blade, dull handle rotted. Behind him, the staircase figures moved their steps perfectly, synchronized creaking like a mechanical rhythm. David shoved through a rear door into a narrow hallway. At its end, another door stood ajar, light leaking from the gap. He sprinted, flung it open, and stumbled into the basement stairs. The air was damp, carrying the smell of mold and earth. He descended quickly, feet pounding wood that threatened to collapse. The basement spread wide stone walls slick with condensation. In the center stood a table covered with monitors, their glow flickering against concrete. Each screen displayed a live feed of the house from the porch, from the upstairs rooms, from the very basement he now occupied. Cameras overlapped angles, redundant, as though to ensure no movement ever escaped their frame. On the table lay stacks of photographs. He lifted one with trembling fingers. It showed himself moments earlier, in the dining room chair, raised face twisted in panic. Another showed him gripping the knife. Another descending the basement stairs. Each image printed seconds after it occurred, still warm to the touch. A low hum vibrated the walls. He turned. In the corner stood a machine, its printer whirring, spitting fresh photographs onto a growing pile. He watched as his current posture, hand holding a photo face, pale under the light, emerged in real time from the slot. He dropped the picture, bile rising in his throat. Above, the floorboards groaned. Footsteps spread through the house, multiplied, surrounding every exit. He grabbed the knife tighter, though the blade felt useless against an invisible system. His mind screamed for escape, but the only path was a narrow window high on the wall, glass cracked frame, rusted. He dragged a chair beneath it, climbed shakily, and shoved at the frame. It resisted, groaning, shards breaking loose. He forced his shoulders through scraping skin against metal. Cold night air brushed his face. He pushed harder, wriggling until his torso slid free. Behind him, the basement door creaked. He didn't look back. He kicked with both legs, forcing himself into the open. He dropped onto wet grass outside, rolling to his knees. The farmhouse loomed, windows glowing faintly as though alive. Cameras blinked within each red dot, pulsing like a heartbeat. He crawled to his feet and staggered toward the tree line, every muscle screaming. Then from the dark field, headlights flared. A car idled at the edge, engine low, its beams locking onto him. Behind the glass silhouettes, weighted cameras raised, recording his frantic flight under the sterile glow. The headlights seared across the field, bleaching the grass white, pinning David in their glare. His body froze instinctively, like prey caught in a predator's beam. The engine hummed low, steady, patient. Behind the windshield, he saw only silhouettes, motionless heads angled forward. Then, in perfect unison, 3 small red lights blinked inside the car. Cameras. David stumbled backward, mud sucking at his shoes. The farmhouse loomed behind him, its windows glowing faintly with their embedded lenses. Ahead, the car waited unmoving, as if daring him to run. He realized there was no safety between the two. The house was a stage, the car another stage. Both were framed, both designed to funnel him into movement. The engine revved, suddenly shattering the stillness. Tires spun, flinging dirt as the car lurched forward. David sprinted toward the tree line, lungs burning, arms pumping. The beams followed, sweeping across the field like searchlights. His shadow stretched grotesquely before him, distorted, flickering against trunks and branches. He plunged into the forest. Branches slashed his face, the roar of the car fading slightly behind, though its light still flickered between trees. He pushed deeper, legs quivering with exhaustion. His mind whispered the futility. No matter how far he ran, the cameras found him. Yet instinct kept him moving. Minutes blurred into agony until he burst into another clearing. At its center rose a water tower, rusted, skeletal, leaning against the weight of decades. A ladder snaked up its side, rungs corroded but intact. Without thinking, he ran to it, gripping the cold metal, hauling himself upward. Each step groaned flakes of rust biting into his palms. Halfway up, he glanced down. Figures emerged from the forest edge, a dozen at least, forming a perimeter around the clearing. Cameras pointed upward, recording his climb. Their stillness was ritualistic, almost reverent. The red dots pulsed in unison, like a constellation of artificial stars. He reached the top, chest heaving, collapsing onto the platform. The view stretched endless forest field, the farmhouse glowing faintly in the distance. But it wasn't freedom. Below, the watchers remained, their lenses never wavering. He crawled to the railing, clutched it tight, body trembling. Then above him a sound. A whirring, faint but unmistakable. He looked up. Against the night sky, small drones hovered, rotors slicing the air. Their lenses glowed red, tilting downward. He was surrounded from below and above, captured from every angle. One drone drifted closer, hovering at eye level. Its camera lens dilated mechanically, clicking as it zoomed. A speaker beneath it crackled. The same calm voice emerged, unaltered by distortion. "Every choice you make, every step you take belongs to us now. Do you understand?" David's throat tightened. He shouted, raw and desperate. "Why me? Why any of this?" The drone tilted, as if curious. The voice replied, measured and final, "Because fear is truth, and truth must be archived." The drones circled, their red eyes blinking in rhythmic cadence. Below, the watchers remained statuesque, documenting his despair. David gripped the railing tighter, pulse hammering, wondering if leaping would deny them their footage or only provide their final frame. David crouched on the water tower platform, the railing cold against his palms, while the drones circled above in perfect rhythm. Below, the watchers stood in their ring, cameras angled upward, unmoving, unbreathing, eternal. He realized then that what terrified him most was not pursuit, it was design. This was not chaos, it was structure. His mind spun, forcing order onto fragments of memory. The house with its attic full of monitors, the motel with its planted envelope, the highway chase that played like a choreographed performance, the ruined warehouse with its crates of equipment, the farmhouse with its live feeds. Every place had been prepared, every moment documented. He was not running through randomness, he was running through a sequence. The voice from the drone still echoed in his head. Fear is truth, and truth must be archived. It suggested purpose beyond sadism. This was not about tormenting him for pleasure. It was about collecting his responses, capturing the raw mechanics of terror. He thought of the missing person flyers he had glimpsed, of the photographs labeled in the laptop archives. Faces long forgotten by the world, preserved only by the watchers' cameras. Victims not killed but consumed, absorbed into endless footage. He wondered if their families had searched, unaware their loved ones existed only in file after file, reduced to images of panic, of pleading, of despair. The drones hovered closer. Their collective hum blended into a single vibrating tone, a frequency that seemed to drill into his skull. His chest tightened. He remembered folklore from his childhood, stories of shadow figures in Salem, of spirits who thrived not on violence but on attention feeding from the gaze itself. He remembered urban legends about cursed tapes, recordings that trapped souls inside celluloid forever. He realized these watchers were not far removed from such myths. Perhaps they had evolved alongside technology. Where once shadows lurked in forests and alleys, now they moved through cameras, lenses, recordings. It wasn't just surveillance, it was folklore modernized. An ancient hunger adapted to modern tools. The thought curdled in his stomach. He had not simply stumbled into a human network. He had collided with something older, parasitic, wearing the mask of technology. They had always existed, but now they had infinite ways to observe, infinite ways to archive, infinite ways to trap. The drones clicked shutters, snapping, as though confirming his revelation. Below, the ring of watchers adjusted their stance slightly, every lens tilting in unison. He realized with fresh terror that even his comprehension, his very moment of analysis, was part of the archive. They wanted him to understand. They wanted to document the progression of realization as clearly as they documented fear. He pressed his forehead to the railing, whispering through clenched teeth. The drone closest to him tilted again, its red eye blinking in what resembled amusement. The voice returned, calm, factual. "Exposure is impossible. We are the archive, and we decide what is remembered." The words chilled him deeper than any pursuit. They were not merely hunters. They were historians of terror, curators of despair. The tower groaned under his weight as he shifted. He had no plan, no route. But his mind churned with one desperate idea. If they archived fear, perhaps he could starve them, deny them what they craved. Deny them the authentic pulse of terror they seemed to worship. It felt impossible, but it was a thought, a thread. He lifted his head, forcing his breath, slow, his heart steady. He imagined erasing panic from his face, deadening every reaction, presenting nothing but blank stillness to their endless lenses. The drones circled. The watchers below remained statuesque. Yet he thought he saw a ripple of unease in their unity, as if the performance they expected had missed its cue. David kept his grip tight on the rusted railing of the water tower, the cold metal biting into his palms, grounding him. The drones circled, recording from above, their red lights, blinking in patient rhythm. The watchers below stood, fixed lenses tilted upward, documenting every breath, but David forced himself to do nothing. No panic, no flinching, no fight or flight, only stillness. Minutes stretched. The effort was unbearable. His chest screamed to heave, his muscles to tremble, his eyes to dart, but he locked his face into a mask, stripped his body of visible reaction. He would not give them what they wanted. He whispered silently inside his skull, "If fear is truth, then I will starve you with lies." For a long moment, nothing shifted. Then one drone dipped closer, as if inspecting him. Its camera whirred lens, narrowing, zooming in. The others adjusted too, circling tighter, their hum rising in pitch. The watchers below leaned slightly forward in unison, a subtle acknowledgement that something was different. The drone nearest extended a small mechanical arm. From its end hung a screen, flickering alive. David's breath hitched, but he suppressed reaction. The screen displayed a live image, him crouched, expression blank. Then abruptly it split. One side showed his current composure. The other side showed earlier footage, him running, screaming, thrashing in water. Side by side, fear against control. A cruel juxtaposition. The voice returned, calm as ever. "Fear is natural, denial is artificial. We record both." David's stomach twisted. They were not unsettled by his defiance. They were fascinated. Even starvation was a variable to them, another angle to their collection. He realized every choice, even resistance, expanded their archive. There was no escape from documentation. His eyes flicked downward despite himself. The watchers had spread further around the clearing, forming a wider ring as though preparing to close. Each lens reflected faint light, glowing like countless tiny eyes. He thought of folklore again, of legends where shadow figures multiplied, when ignored, feeding not only on terror but on the attempt to pretend they weren't there. He gripped the railing tighter, forcing calm. If denial only created another category of footage, then the only path left was unpredictability. Something they couldn't catalog. Something outside their script. His mind churned desperately, searching for variables unplanned. The drones shifted higher, drifting back into wider orbit. Below, the watchers remained fixed, their patience endless. David seized the moment. He stood abruptly, balanced on the railing itself. The height stretched dizzying beneath him, the clearing framed like a stage. Camera zoomed instantly, red dots locking onto his silhouette. He spread his arms wide, forcing his voice into a steady monotone. "You don't own me." Silence answered, but every lens pulsed brighter, acknowledging the defiance. He leaned forward slightly, testing balance, hinting at a fall. Gasps did not escape him, no fear was given. He thought briefly that if he leapt, if he ended it himself, they would capture only his choice, not his terror. But then he imagined his remains catalogued, replayed endlessly, his death archived like every other expression, even that he realized would belong to them. The platform shuddered under his weight. From the tree line, one figure finally moved. It stepped forward, separating from the static ring, raising not just a camera, but something longer, metallic, gleaming in faint light. For the first time, David saw one of them armed. Not merely documenting, but prepared to intervene. The voice returned sharper now. "Unpredictability is tolerated, non-compliance is not." The words slid under his skin like ice. They weren't simply archivists, they enforced the archive. His refusal threatened the structure, and structure was their god. David lowered himself carefully from the railing, pulse racing. The watchers remained in place, their patience returned, but he knew a line had been crossed. He could no longer play with denial. They would tighten their grip. He pressed his back against the railing chest, rising and falling with the effort of controlled breaths. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled low and steady. Storm clouds gathered above the forest, dimming what little light remained. He realized the storm's timing was no coincidence. Weather, too, could be staged, manipulated, folded into the performance. He wondered if the watchers had been waiting for it, ready to capture his fear against flashes of lightning. The first drop of rain struck his cheek. Shutters clicked from below. Rain began as a faint scatter, droplets hissing against the rusted platform of the water tower. Then the sky split open. Sheets of water poured over David, soaking his clothes, stinging his eyes, chilling him to the marrow. Thunder cracked overhead, rolling through the forest with bone-deep resonance. Lightning flashed stark and violent, illuminating the clearing below in stark white frames. Each flash revealed the watchers more clearly. Rows of hooded figures still, and patient cameras raised like ritual icons. The drones adapted instantly. Their lenses widened, adjusting for the dark red lights, blinking brighter to cut through the storm. They hovered with perfect stability, despite the wind, their hum blending with the howl of the weather. Every drop that struck David's face was captured, magnified, archived. He pressed his back against the railing, shivering. The storm felt alive, choreographed to heighten his terror. Each thunderclap arrived at precise intervals, each lightning strike framing him like a photograph. It was theater, and he was the unwilling actor. His mind searched for patterns again. Folklore told of storms, summoned by forces beyond human, signs of divine anger or supernatural feeding. But this storm did not feel random. Its timing had been perfect, arriving at the exact moment his defiance faltered. It felt manufactured, staged as carefully as the bridge chase or the farmhouse footage. If the watchers had the power to bend environment, then even nature had become part of their archive. David ducked low, crawling across the slick platform. He scanned the horizon. The forest stretched endless, but in one direction, he saw faint glow, a cluster of lights blurred by rain, perhaps a town or an outpost. Hope clawed through despair. Civilization meant possibility. Witnesses meant disruption. He clung to the thought and descended the ladder. Every rung was slick, threatening to slip his grip. His muscles screamed with fatigue. Lightning fractured the sky, and in each burst he glimpsed the watchers below, lenses never wavering. Some shifted closer as he neared the ground, their movements synchronized, unhurried, precise. At last his boots sank into mud. He didn't pause. He sprinted toward the faint glow, rain lashing, wind howling. The watchers did not chase directly. Instead, they followed at a measured pace, spreading in wide arcs, always within sight. Their patience unnerved him more than pursuit. They didn't need to catch him now. They only needed to capture the footage of his frantic escape. The forest thinned. The glow sharpened into street lamps, their halos trembling in the storm. A small town emerged, streets deserted, storefronts shuttered. Water ran in rivers along gutters, neon signs flickering in empty windows. David stumbled onto the pavement, gasping, his body half collapsed with relief. But the streets were too still, too perfect. He ducked into the nearest shop, its door unlocked, the bell overhead silent. Inside, mannequins lined the walls, their glassy eyes staring blankly. Clothing hung stiff on their frames, water dripping from David's clothes onto the tile. He sagged against the counter, chest heaving. For a moment, the storm outside muffled into background static. Then shutters clicked. He spun. One mannequin's head tilted slightly. Its eyes glowed red. Not mannequins, cameras, disguised lenses hidden within glass. Each figure pointed at him, silently recording his intrusion. He backed toward the exit, breath breaking. Outside, the storm raged, lightning casting the town in fragmented glimpses. More mannequins waited behind shop windows, all red dots glowing faintly. The entire town was staged. A constructed set. A false refuge. David collapsed to his knees, realization crashing harder than thunder. There was no escape into civilization. The watchers had already built their own. A ghost town populated not by people but by lenses. A nearby television in the shop flickered to life. Static cleared into footage of him minutes earlier, standing at the water tower, railing drenched and defiant. The display cut to him running through the rain, then entering the store. A delay of seconds at most, his life fed directly into the loop. On screen, his current posture appeared, kneeling, broken, staring upward. The broadcast was live. The voice seeped from hidden speakers, steady, calm. "You are performing well. Do not stop now." David rose slowly from the tile, legs trembling, water dripping from his clothes in steady rhythm. The mannequins surrounding him glowed faintly at their eyes, each red point steady, unblinking. He had wandered into a trap disguised as safety. The town was no refuge. It was a set constructed carefully, its false inhabitants designed only to watch. He staggered out of the shop, Rain lashed his face, neon buzzing overhead. The mannequins behind glass storefronts stared outward, lenses glimmering within their sockets. Lightning illuminated the street in jagged intervals, and with each flash, more figures appeared. Some stood under bus stops, others leaned against lamp posts. Dozens lined the sidewalks, cameras hidden in their rigid faces. David's chest tightened. He tried to run, but the street stretched unnaturally, long blocks, repeating buildings mirrored. Every turn led him back to the same intersection. The mannequins multiplied their lenses, documenting his spiral, archiving confusion as thoroughly as fear. He ducked into an alley. Trash bins stood in perfect rows, their lids half open. He reached to push one aside, and his hand froze. A small lens blinked from the bin's interior. He shoved it away violently, stumbling back. The entire alley was filled with disguised cameras beneath crates, inside broken signs, within the hollow eyes of pigeons mounted on wires. Nothing here was unobserved. His thoughts fractured. This was not simply a network of stalkers. It was a constructed ecosystem designed to erase the distinction between reality and stage. Every object could be a lens, every surface another angle. He realized with horror that perhaps the watchers did not hide cameras inside the world. Perhaps the world itself had been replaced, rebuilt as nothing but cameras. He collapsed against a wall, lungs scraping for air. Above, a billboard flickered. It showed footage of him kneeling in the same alley seconds earlier. Then it updated, displaying his current posture, eyes wide, body sagging. Rain distorted the screen, but the image remained clear enough to mock him. A door creaked nearby. He turned sharply. From the shadows, a mannequin stepped forward. Unlike the others, it moved on, jointed legs, deliberate, stiff but functional. Its arms lifted, a camera welded into its chest. The lens whirred, adjusting, fixing on him. Another mannequin followed, then another. They walked in stilted rhythm, forming a circle around him. David pushed himself upright, stumbling backward until his shoulders struck the wet brick. The mannequins closed in, silent eyes glowing brighter. Their frames were imperfect, cracks along limbs, torsos misshapen, but the cameras embedded within were flawless. One extended a hand. Clutched in its rigid grip was a photograph, edges soaked by rain. David snatched it, breath ragged. The picture showed him from moments ago, crouched in the shop among mannequins, fear raw on his face. Across the bottom, scrawled in uneven black ink, "You belong here now." He hurled the photo into the gutter, fury boiling, and shoved through the mannequins with violent desperation. Their stiff arms clawed against his shoulders, but did not restrain him. They only filmed his resistance, capturing every flinch, every strike. He stumbled onto another street. The storm raged, lights flickering. At the town square stood a fountain, its basin cracked, water spilling over the edge. But in the center of the basin was no statue. Instead, a single tripod rose, camera mounted, its red light glowing brighter than all the others. Around the square, mannequins stood in perfect concentric circles, hundreds of them, all lenses pointed inward. David collapsed to his knees at the square's edge. The central camera clicked its shutter, echoing like thunder. Immediately, all other mannequins clicked in perfect unison, a deafening symphony of documentation. His mind nearly fractured at the sound, the realization that his every angle was being captured simultaneously, preserved from infinite perspectives. The rain intensified, pounding his skull, driving him lower. He pressed his palms to his ears, but the shutters still tore through his bones. He screamed into the storm, a wordless release, knowing even this outburst was their prize. Then, abruptly, silence. The cameras stopped. The mannequins froze, red lights extinguished in unison. Only the storm remained, battering the empty stage. David lowered his hands cautiously, heart thundering. The square was dark, the lenses dead. For the first time in endless hours, he was not being recorded. Relief surged, and dread followed instantly, because silence in their world meant transition. The silence pressed against David's skull harder than the storm itself. The mannequins stood inert in their concentric rings around the fountain, all red lights extinguished. The central tripod remained its lens, dead rain dripping down the black glass. For the first time since this began, he was unobserved, or at least it seemed so. He staggered to his feet, every muscle taut, waiting for movement. The mannequins did not shift, their glass eyes reflected only lightning, hollow and lifeless. He stepped cautiously into the square, each footfall splashing through water, pooled on broken stone. The fountain gurgled faintly, but otherwise the world was still. Relief prickled his spine, then suspicion. Nothing in this ordeal had been random. If the watchers stopped recording, it was not mercy, it was experiment. They wanted to see how he behaved in absence of the lens. What choices he made when the gaze was removed. Even this was data. He approached the tripod. Its black lens stared upward, rain streaking across the surface. He touched it, cold, dead. For the first time he was certain no red light glowed beneath. He gripped the camera, intending to smash it against stone. But as he lifted, the faint whir of gears stirred within. The lens clicked open, red light pulsing once. Then another. The shutter snapped directly into his face. Instantly, every mannequin reignited. Hundreds of red dots blinked to life, synchronized, dazzling through the rain. The silence ruptured with the simultaneous whir of lenses. The square exploded back into sound. David staggered backward, blinded by the sudden resurrection of attention. His scream tore through the storm, but thunder swallowed it. He ran, slipping across the wet stone, shoving through the mannequins. Their stiff arms brushed his shoulders, but did not restrain him. They only documented his renewed panic, every frame burned into their endless archive. He burst into another street, lungs on fire. The town stretched in impossible geometry, again blocks, repeating signs mirrored storefronts identical. He turned left, then right, always arriving at the same intersection. The mannequins followed, but never closed, and always maintaining distance, lenses unwavering. At last he found himself outside a church. Its spire loomed crooked against the storm, bell tower cracked, cross-bent. The doors gaped open, wind howling through the nave. He stumbled inside, boots clattering against stone. Rows of pews stretched forward, each seat occupied not by people but by mannequins. They sat in perfect silence, heads tilted toward the altar, cameras glinting faintly in eye sockets. At the altar stood another tripod, identical to the one in the square. Its lens turned slowly as he entered, adjusting, finding him in the cavernous dark. A projector mounted above the pulpit flickered to life. Light splashed across the cracked wall. The projection showed him just seconds earlier, bursting through the church doors, soaked, broken, terrified. The footage continued, a delay of mere breaths, replaying his current steps even as he lived them. He walked toward the front pew, and the projection walked with him, perfectly mirrored. It was not simply documentation anymore, it was prophecy. David collapsed against the nearest pew, his knees giving. His reflection on the wall mirrored the collapse. He stared upward, rain dripping from broken windows, light from the projector washing his face pale. The voice returned, deeper, resonant, echoing, as though spoken through the very stone. Performance requires faith. Faith requires audience. You have both. Do not deny your role. David's throat ached, voice raw. Why me? The answer came calm, cruel. He shook his head violently, pressing his palms against his skull. The mannequins in the pews leaned forward slightly, red eyes glowing, brighter lenses narrowing. They were leaning closer like congregants, eager for the sermon's climax. The storm outside intensified, thunder rattling the rafters. Lightning illuminated the mannequins in stark flashes, their rigid faces gleaming like bone. The projection shifted, now showing not his present but possible futures, him running, him kneeling, him falling beneath countless hands. Each scene flickered, then vanished, as if testing options for the next act. He realized with hollow clarity they weren't only recording him anymore, they were scripting him. The church walls trembled with the weight of thunder, rain hammering the cracked windows and sheets. The mannequins sat silently in the pews, their red-lit eyes fixed on David, every lens recording. The projection above the altar flickered, alternating between his past, his present, and distorted fragments of his possible futures. It was no longer an archive, it was an instruction. David's breath rasped. He rose slowly, muscles stiff, water dripping from his torn clothes. The projection mirrored him, exactly a second delayed, as though mocking his autonomy. Then the image shifted abruptly, showing him kneeling at the altar, head bowed, arms extended in surrender. His stomach turned. They weren't just documenting choices anymore, they were suggesting them. He whispered through clenched teeth. You can't write me. The mannequins leaned forward as one, their movements synchronized like a congregation, answering prayer. The red lights pulsed brighter, illuminating the nave in unnatural glow. The tripod at the altar rotated with mechanical grace, adjusting its angle, clicking as it locked onto his face. The voice returned, amplified through hidden speakers, embedded in the wall's resonant cold. Autonomy is illusion, performance is eternal. Accept your role. David shook his head violently, stumbling backward down the aisle. I'm not yours! His voice cracked, raw from storm and panic. The projection changed again. Now it displayed him running toward the exit. Then a second image layered over it, him being dragged back inside by faceless figures. The two scenes flickered together, choices collapsing into inevitability. Whichever path he took, it had already been archived. His pulse thundered. He bolted anyway, feet pounding against stone, crashing through the heavy doors. The storm outside struck him instantly, rain, blinding wind howling. He sprinted down the steps into the flooded square water, slapping his shins. Behind him, the church bells began to toll, though the tower was cracked and broken. Each toll echoed through the deserted town, a signal announcing his continued performance. The mannequins stirred from the pews. They filed out of the church in rigid procession, pouring into the square. Their glowing eyes blinked in cadence, with the bells, an army of lenses, marching to ensure every moment was captured. David ran through the streets, lungs burning, but the projection followed. On billboards, on shop windows, on the sides of buses, parked eternally at the curbs, his image repeated. Each screen showed him from a different angle, some delayed by seconds, others by minutes. He saw himself multiplied, fractured across the architecture of the false town. No matter where he turned, his face looked back, exhausted, terrified, archived. He stumbled into another alley. This time the walls closed tighter, claustrophobic, dripping water from rusted pipes. At the far end glowed another screen, larger, brighter, humming with static. He approached cautiously, chest heaving. The static cleared into a live feed. It showed not him but the interior of a house, a child's bedroom, posters on the walls, toys scattered across the floor. David froze. He recognized the room. It was his childhood bedroom. The camera view panned slowly, lingering on the bed where he had once slept, the desk where he had once written homework. His throat closed. No one should know this place. It had been demolished years ago, replaced by an apartment complex. And yet here it was resurrected, preserved, broadcast directly to him. The voice seeped from the screen, calm, assured. We were always watching. Long before you knew. His knees buckled. Memories flooded nights as a child when he felt eyes on him in the dark, when shadows seemed too deliberate, too patient. He had told himself it was imagination. Now he knew it had been rehearsal. He had been theirs since the beginning. Lightning split the sky above, thunder rattling the buildings. The mannequins gathered at both ends of the alley, sealing him in lenses glowing brighter. The screen flickered again, shifting from his childhood room back to the current alley. His own pale face stared at him, mirrored in high definition. He realized with shuddering clarity the archive was not just present or future, it reached backward too. They owned his past. Rain hammered the alley, cascading off gutters, pooling around David's feet. The mannequins sealed both ends, their glowing lenses forming a corridor of red light. At the far wall, the massive screen hummed, flickering between his pale face and his childhood bedroom. The voice that had stalked him across highways, houses, forests, and ruins seeped once more from hidden speakers. You were ours before you could speak. You dreamed beneath our gaze. Every nightmare, every cry, every moment of fear fed the archive. David pressed his palms to his ears, shaking his head, but the words burrowed through the storm, unavoidable. His chest heaved, throat raw, yet something inside him shifted. Horror gave way to grim calculation. If they owned his past, then every memory of unease as a child, every shadow that lingered too long, had been theirs. If that was true, then fear itself was their inheritance. And if fear was all they wanted, maybe he could unwrite it. He pushed himself upright, staggering forward toward the giant screen. His reflection stared back, wide-eyed, desperate. Behind it flickered images of him at 5 years old, clutching a blanket, staring at the corner of his dark room, where no one else had ever seen the figure watching. His stomach twisted. He whispered through clenched teeth. You don't own this. Not anymore. The mannequins tilted their heads in unison, lenses, narrowing as though curious. The red glow intensified, recording the declaration. David lunged at the screen, slamming his fists into its surface. Sparks flared, static surged, the image fractured. He pounded again, glass cracking beneath his hands. Rain mixed with sweat dripping down his face as he struck until shards gave way, exposing wires and humming circuits. The screen fizzled, collapsed into darkness. For 3 heartbeats, silence reigned. No images, no reflections, no voice. Then the mannequins clicked simultaneously, shutters snapping, capturing the destruction. The voice returned, no longer calm but sharpened. Erasure is forbidden. The archive is eternal. The alley trembled. From the broken screen, dozens of smaller lenses pushed outward, blinking alive, sprouting like eyes from metal veins. They extended on mechanical arms, surrounding him, boxing him in with unblinking clarity. Each lens captured his face from a new angle, erasing his attempt at erasure with infinite replacements. David screamed not in terror but in rage. He seized a loose pipe from the wet ground and swung wildly, smashing lenses left and right. Glass-shattered wires sparked fragments, fell into the water. Yet for every one destroyed, two more extended from the carcass of the screen, blinking anew. His defiance became part of the footage, rage archived as carefully as fear. He collapsed to his knees, pipe slipping from numb fingers. His chest heaved, vision blurring. The mannequins at the alley's mouth stepped closer, silent march closing the corridor. Their glow pulsed in cadence with his heartbeat, synchronized, inevitable. And then silence again, not absence but replacement. The storm outside muffled. The mannequins froze. The lenses withdrew. The broken screen flickered one last time. This time, it displayed not his past or present, but text across a blank field. Final stage initiated. The words burned white against black. His gut clenched. He looked around, but the mannequins no longer advanced. They had formed walls, now barriers, guiding him toward the far end of the alley where a door had appeared in the bricks. A door that had not been there before. The voice seeped again, smoother, almost soothing. All performances end in resolution. Step forward, David. Accept your conclusion. The rain slackened. Thunder drifted. The mannequins glowed, dimmed, their lenses steady but patient. David stared at the door, pulse hammering. His mind fractured between choices. To step through meant surrender to their design. To stay meant annihilation by suffocation. Both were stages. Both were endings. And yet something deeper flickered. If they had built this performance, if they had scripted his conclusion, perhaps the act of refusing resolution was the only rebellion left. He gritted his teeth, body shaking, and whispered to himself, "No curtain, not yet." David stood drenched in the alley, the false town storm slackening into a misty drizzle. The mannequins formed rigid walls on both sides, their lenses glowing faintly, unblinking. The door at the far end waited, wood darkened with rain, handle gleaming faintly under the last flickers of neon. The broken screen behind him hissed static, its fractured text still burned into his vision. Final stage initiated. His body trembled with exhaustion, but his refusal hardened in his chest. He whispered to himself again, steadier this time, "No curtain. Not yet." The mannequins did not react. They stood motionless, forming perfect rows as though the world itself had frozen into tableau. Only the door seemed alive, its handle reflecting faint light, its surface breathing in rhythm with the mist. He realized then this was their ending, the scripted closure of his performance. The final act they wanted archived. He staggered backward instead. Each step splashed water. His pulse raced, waiting for the mannequins to advance. They did not. Their stillness was worse than pursuit, suggesting that even disobedience had been considered. Refusal, too, was part of the archive. His eyes darted upward. The storm clouds were tearing apart, revealing thin veins of night sky. Stars flickered, faintly distant, untouched by red lenses. An idea sparked, dangerous, desperate. If every surface of their false world was embedded with cameras, then perhaps only the uncorrupted sky remained unwatched. He bolted, suddenly breaking from the alley, pushing past the mannequins. Their arms twitched, but did not seize him. Shutters clicked in rapid succession, capturing his flight, but no hand restrained him. He ran into the open square once more, fountain overflowing neon, buzzing faintly. Above, clouds split wider. For the first time since this nightmare began, the storm broke into silence. David tilted his head back, staring into the sky. Cool air brushed his skin, stars glittered above. He spread his arms, forcing his body to stillness, refusing fear, refusing panic. "You don't own this," he whispered to the night. The mannequins surrounded the square lenses, pulsing faster. Drones emerged from rooftops, their rotors slicing silence, red eyes angling upward with him. The sky became crowded with mechanical forms, but above them the stars remained distant, unreachable. For the first time, David felt a separation between the world they controlled and the infinite space beyond. The voice returned lower, sharper. David laughed, the sound ragged but real. Immediately the drones descended, swarming. Their lenses widened, glowing brighter, their hum vibrating through his bones. The mannequins pressed closer, ring tightening, red lights converging. Yet David remained fixed, eyes locked on the sky, refusing to flinch. And then something fractured. The projection screens across the town flickered erratically. The mannequins' lights blinked out of rhythm. The drones stuttered mid-air, their rotors faltering. His resistance, His refusal to provide the expected conclusion had created static in their design. One screen on a nearby building lit, suddenly displaying footage not of David but of the watchers themselves. Hooded figures, cameras shaking in their hands, lenses cracking as though turning inward. Another screen followed, showing rows of mannequins collapsing, heads snapping back, red eyes extinguished. David's breath caught. For the first time he felt he had struck something true, not escape, not yet, but disruption. The voice roared back, stripped of calm, warped with distortion. Resolution cannot be denied. If you will not perform, you will be erased. The fountain in the square exploded, water spraying outward as a massive lens rose from its depths. Taller than any man, wide as a doorway, its surface curved, red glow searing. It rotated toward him, shutter opening like the eye of a god. The drones circled above it, mannequins bowed toward it. This was no ordinary camera. This was the archive itself, the core of their system. David staggered, soaked, shivering, but his eyes locked on the monstrous lens. His pulse slowed. He realized the watchers had made a mistake. They had revealed the center, the single object they depended on to contain him. His fists clenched. His voice broke the square. Then erase me, but I'll take you with me. The monstrous lens towered above the square, rising from the shattered fountain like an altar exposed. Rainwater streamed down its curved surface, glowing faintly red, pulsing as though alive. The mannequins surrounding the square had gone motionless, their lenses dimmed in reverence. The drones above circled slowly, forming a halo of blinking eyes. Every machine, every watcher, every false inhabitant deferred to this single device. David's breath came slow and ragged. He stood soaked in the square, his body trembling with fatigue, but his eyes fixed on the lens. This was the heart. The archive itself, the machine that turned terror into permanence. The voice surged from hidden speakers, deeper now, resonant as thunder. This is conclusion. To resist is annihilation. To strike is futility. To kneel is survival. David shook his head, defiance flaring one last time. You don't want survival. You want performance. Without me, without fear, you starve. The lens widened, its red glow intensifying until the square bathed in crimson light. Shutters clicked in rapid fire, documenting him from every possible angle. His silhouette burned into the glow, framed as though this moment had been the inevitable climax all along. His fists clenched, his mind raced. He had no weapons, no allies, only exhaustion and fury. But if every act was recorded, then perhaps the only way to break their script was to do the unfilmable, something the archive could not anticipate or frame. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the towering lens. David lunged forward, sprinting through waterlogged stone, his body propelled by desperation alone. The mannequins did not move. The drones did not descend. They only documented his charge. He reached the fountain's edge, seized a chunk of broken stone, and hurled it with every ounce of strength. The rock slammed against the lens, shattering on impact. Cracks spidered across the curved glass. Sparks flared inside. The red light flickered. The mannequins' heads jerked violently, twitching as though connected by invisible wires. The drones wavered midair, their formations collapsing. Screens across the false town flickered with static images, scrambling between him and fragments of other victims. For the first time, the archive faltered. David roared a sound torn from marrow and struck again. He climbed the fountain's edge, smashing his fists, his shoulders, his entire body against the fractured surface. The glass gave way, splintering outward in shards. A blinding white light erupted, searing his eyes, burning into his skull. He fell backward, collapsing into the square. Silence followed, a silence deeper than storm or static. When he opened his eyes, the mannequins were gone. The drones had vanished. The false buildings stood hollow, their neon signs extinguished, their windows dark. The town was empty, lifeless, dead. Only the shattered lens remained in the fountain, fragments scattered like broken bone. David dragged himself upright, body shaking, breath ragged. His ears rang, his skin burned, but his chest filled with the first fragile seed of hope. He staggered to the fountain's edge, staring at the shattered core. Then he froze. Among the shards, faint red glows blinked, tiny pulsing fragments, each alive. The pieces of the lens had not died, they had multiplied. The shards quivered, vibrating against stone. One lifted into the air, hovering, its glow steady, then another, then dozens. They rose from the rubble like fireflies, each lens small, mobile, autonomous. They swarmed upward, filling the sky in a lattice of blinking red light. The voice returned, fractured, now layered, echoing through countless tiny speakers. Destruction creates division. Division expands the archive. You have not broken us, you have spread us. David's heart plummeted. His strike had not ended them, it had accelerated them. What had once been one core was now countless fragments, each capable of recording each alive. The swarm drifted outward, dispersing through the false town, into the streets, into the sky. They would spread forever, embedding themselves in every corner of the world. The archive had no center now. It was infinite. David collapsed to his knees, water rising around him. His chest convulsed with sobs, half rage, half despair. He whispered into the empty square voice, nearly drowned by rain. I only made you stronger. Above him, the sky pulsed red with 1,000 tiny eyes. David remained kneeling in the flooded square rain, washing over his bruised skin, his fists slack at his sides. Above, the sky pulsed with hundreds of tiny red fragments, drifting outward in slow spirals, dispersing like embers from a dying fire. Only this fire would never fade. Each shard carried a lens, each lens alive, each recording without pause. The archive was no longer central, it was infinite, fractal, unkillable. The mannequins were gone. The drones had vanished. The false buildings loomed empty, lifeless shells, their neon flickering out one by one. Yet he knew this absence was not victory. It was evolution. The stage had collapsed, but only because the watchers no longer required it. The archive could follow him anywhere now, everywhere. He staggered to his feet, chest heaving. His body begged for collapse, but his mind churned with jagged thoughts. If the fragments spread across the world, then no place would remain untouched. Every home, every street, every night sky would contain an unseen red dot blinking from the shadows. Humanity would be devoured, one lens at a time, documented without end. Lightning fractured the horizon, illuminating the shards, dispersing into storm clouds. Each reflected a sliver of his face, multiplied, fractured, distorted. He saw himself stretched across the sky, a mosaic of terror feeding an archive that no longer needed a heart. He stumbled toward the edge of the square boots, splashing through shallow water. The town streets seemed different, now less structured, less staged. Some buildings crumbled into rubble as he passed, their false facades collapsing into dust. The mannequins that had filled windows and sidewalks lay toppled inert, as if their purpose had been absorbed into the fragments above. Yet screens remained. Broken televisions buzzed with static in store windows, billboards sputtered. Each device displayed the same message in stark white letters, replication complete. His stomach twisted. They were announcing it, documenting the moment not as his victory, but as their expansion. He had not stopped their archive, he had accelerated its decentralization. He had birthed their new form. A hollow laugh escaped, his lips ragged and broken. I freed you. The words felt poisonous, heavy with unintended truth. His strike against the core had fractured their chains, not his. They had used his rebellion as catalyst. Now the performance was no longer confined to one actor. The archive would harvest endlessly, spreading across countless lives. He stumbled into another street. The rain slackened, replaced by unnatural stillness. No mannequins, no drones, no staged glow. For a fleeting moment, it looked like an ordinary town, deserted but real. He heard his own footsteps echo against wet pavement. Hope flared faintly. Perhaps he could walk beyond their reach. Then, he saw it. In a darkened shop window, faint but unmistakable, a shard hovered. A red light blinked within the glass. He approached slowly, heart sinking. The shard pulsed once, then the screen flickered alive. His face appeared not from the past, not from the square, but from this exact instant. His reflection lifted its head in tandem, perfectly synchronized. The archive was no longer delayed, it was immediate. Real-time. The voice seeped through, layered, multiplied, no longer bound to one machine. It came from every broken speaker, every fragment, every unseen corner. You are resolution, David. But resolution is never final. Only replicated, only preserved. He staggered backward, clutching his temples, his vision blurred, ears ringing with the omnipresent sound. The red dots in the sky spread further, drifting like a swarm of stars across the horizon. Soon they would scatter beyond sight. Soon they would be everywhere. He fell to his knees, breath ragged, whispering to himself, "There's no escaping you." The voice answered instantly, calm matter of fact. There never was. David staggered down the fractured street, each step splashing into shallow water. The storm clouds had thinned, but the sky above was not comforting. Red shards drifted outward in infinite formation, pulsing like artificial constellations. They spread past the horizon, past the clouds, embedding themselves into the night like malignant stars. Everywhere he turned, reflections confirmed the same truth. Shop windows, broken televisions, the surface of puddles. Each shimmered with his image, captured and rebroadcast instantly. The delay was gone. He no longer lived seconds ahead of the archive. He lived inside it, every movement folded into endless repetition. He pressed against a lamppost for support, chest heaving, mind fracturing. The mannequins were gone, but he felt no victory in their absence. Their silence had been replaced by something worse, ubiquity. The watchers no longer required physical form. They were not confined to towns or stages. They had become atmosphere integrated into reflection itself. The voice came not from a single speaker, but from everywhere at once. Faint hums from drains, echoes through glass, resonance in the vibrating lamppost beneath his palm. Layered, multiplied, distorted, until it felt like the town itself was speaking. Fear persists because you persist. Erase yourself and the archive erases with you. His stomach dropped. The suggestion was clear. Self-destruction as resolution, a script disguised as choice. He tightened his grip on the lamppost, whispering through gritted teeth, "That's what you want." Another ending to file away. The red shards pulsed in unison, as though affirming. The reflections in the windows shifted. They showed him walking into the middle of the street, kneeling, lowering his head, surrendering. They displayed the image over and over, a choreography of submission. His pulse thundered. His thoughts spiraled. Could he defy them by refusing to end? Could he starve them by clinging to existence, even hollow, even broken? Or would eternal resistance only expand their archive further, filling it with endless footage of defiance? He was caught in a loop where every option was theirs. He stumbled forward, the town warped with each step, buildings bent at impossible angles, storefronts repeating alleys looping back. Geometry itself was folding, forcing him inward. He realized the false town was collapsing, no longer needed now that the fragments had spread beyond. He was being shepherded toward a final frame. At the town center, where streets converged, a wide intersection stretched open. Every surface glowed red. Screens lined the buildings, all showing him from different angles, each feed slightly offset, multiplying into infinite versions of himself. The shards swarmed above the intersection, their lights blinking in rhythmic pulses, forming a dome overhead. He stepped into the center, trembling, soaked, half-broken. Every screen shifted simultaneously, displaying a single phrase in bold white text, "Final witness." His throat tightened. He understood. He was no longer just subject. He was being asked to confirm the archive itself, to stand as living proof of its permanence. They wanted him to accept that even resistance had become part of the performance. He screamed into the red-lit dome, voice raw and shaking. "You'll never have me." The screens flickered instantly, updating the footage to replay his scream from dozens of angles. The echo bounced across walls, layered into a grotesque chorus. The shards pulsed brighter, syncing with his outburst. Even defiance was theirs now. His legs buckled. He dropped to his knees, rain mixing with tears on his face. The dome of red lights closed tighter, their glow searing into his vision. For the first time since this began, he felt his will cracking. No escape, no silence, no act outside the archive. His life was a loop endlessly replayed. The voice returned, calm again, victorious. "This is climax. You are final witness. You will see us spread." The shards pressed closer, their glow burning white-hot reflections multiplying across every surface. His body trembled. His mind fractured under the weight of infinite versions of himself. The archive had become everything. He was nowhere except inside it. The intersection pulsed like a living organ, every shard above glowing in synchronized rhythm. David remained on his knees, body sagging, eyes unfocused. The reflections around him multiplied until he could no longer tell which was the original and which was the copy. Each screen showed him from a new perspective. His jaw clenched, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. He was infinite and empty, fractured into countless angles of despair. The red lights pressed closer, a dome tightening. The shards descended slowly, their glow so bright it seared the wet pavement in patterns. He realized the shapes they formed were deliberate. Circles, spirals, grids. The archive was arranging itself into geometry, creating symbols out of surveillance. One shard hovered inches from his face, its lens dilating. He could see his reflection within the curved glass, warped, stretched, endless. The hum around him deepened, vibration, running through the pavement up his bones. The entire intersection was transforming into a machine, streets, buildings, even air itself reduced to circuitry. The voice returned, no longer layered but singular, direct, piercing. "Enter resolution." David shook his head weakly, lips cracked. I won't. The shard pulsed, the ground trembled. Suddenly the pavement beneath him split glowing red. He fell backward, scrambling as cracks widened, forming a vast aperture beneath the intersection. Inside yawned an abyss lit by countless descending lights. It was not darkness, it was endless footage, reels of lives playing simultaneously, a churning ocean of documentation. Faces twisted in terror, bodies fleeing through forests, children crying in bedrooms, all preserved, eternal archived. David's breath caught. He had found the core not in a single machine, but in the abyss itself. A place where every recorded fear merged, layered, fed into infinity. The Watchers had built a pit of memory so deep, it devoured existence itself. The shards swirled overhead, then dove into the chasm one by one, vanishing into the ocean of footage. Their glow illuminated fragments of lives as they merged faces. He almost recognized people. He had glimpsed on missing flyers, strangers whose terror was indistinguishable from his own. The archive had consumed them all. The voice thundered, vibrating the bones of the world. Join them. The ground shook violently. The aperture widened, pulling at his body. He clawed at the pavement nails, splitting skin tearing. The suction dragged him toward the pit, toward the eternal ocean of images. His reflection stared back at him from within the abyss, multiplied 1,000 times, screaming silently. David's mind fractured. He thought of childhood shadows, of the farmhouse, of the mannequins, of the water tower. Every stage, every pursuit, every hopeless moment had been leading here. This was climax, not death, not escape, but assimilation. His body slid closer, boots scraping against wet stone. He screamed, voice shredding his throat. "You don't get to keep me." The abyss answered with silence, then with images. His scream replayed, stretched, multiplied across thousands of screens. His refusal was theirs, now too, archived, endless. At the edge of the pit, he seized a jagged fragment of pavement and swung it into the nearest shard. The glass exploded, sparks showering. But the moment the shard shattered, another image of him, doing so, appeared within the abyss, replayed forever. His rebellion became another file, another relic for eternity. He hung at the precipice rein, hammering his back, the ocean of footage roaring below. His arms trembled, fingers bleeding as he clung to the fractured edge. Above the shards circled tighter, their glow blinding, their hum deafening. The voice returned, whispering, now cold and certain. "You are already ours. Even if you fall, even if you resist, every frame of you has been taken. You are archived." David's grip slipped. His body lurched downward. For a split second, suspended above the abyss, he saw himself reflected across infinite screens, each replaying his final fall before it happened. Then gravity claimed him. David plummeted into the abyss, arms flailing, body weightless. The suction dragged him downward, rain vanishing above as the aperture sealed shut. Darkness did not meet him. Instead, a blinding cascade of images swallowed his descent. Screens floated in infinite layers, stacked upon one another like sediment of the dead. Each screen played fragments of lives devoured by the archive. He spiraled between them, unable to control his fall. On one screen, a woman screamed as faceless figures closed in. On another, a child hid beneath a bed, wide eyes staring at an unseen shadow. Further below, an old man collapsed in an alley, red dots reflecting in his tears. Every possible terror replayed in endless loop, their anguish preserved, their futures erased. David twisted midair, lungs, searing eyes burning from the glow. The abyss pulsed with a rhythm that wasn't random. The screens didn't play freely. They synchronized, layering in patterns like an orchestra of horror. Every sob, every cry, every frantic step harmonized into cadence. He realized with sickness that the archive was not simply storing fear. It was composing with it, building symphonies of despair. He struck one of the screen's shoulder, slamming into its surface. Instead of shattering, it rippled like water, pulling him inside. Suddenly he stood in the middle of the scene, an abandoned hallway lit by flickering bulbs. His own breath echoed unnaturally, reverberating like an intruder in someone else's nightmare. At the far end of the hall, a figure limped, distorted head, jerking in broken rhythm. The sound of clicking shutters echoed closer with each step. "No," he whispered, voice trembling. "This isn't mine." But the figure advanced. Its face was his. A distorted reflection of David, eyes wide, mouth agape in endless loop of terror. Cameras hung from its shoulders, embedded in its arms, glowing red as it staggered forward. He stumbled backward, slamming into the wall, but the wall was only another screen. His back pressed against footage of someone else, another victim's terror bleeding into his own. The hallway buckled, collapsing into static. He fell again, ripped free of the scene, tumbling deeper into the abyss. Layer after layer consumed him. Faces screamed at him from screens that clung to his skin like webs. His own reflection returned constantly, younger, older, warped, multiplied. Each version lived in its own loop, archived forever, tearing at the edges of his sanity. At last, he landed hard on unseen ground. The impact rattled his bones. He gasped, lifting his head. He was in a vast chamber, circular, stretching without ceiling. The walls were lined entirely with screens stacked floor to sky. Each one showed him every movement since the farmhouse, every escape, every collapse, every scream. His entire journey was documented here, cut into infinite angles, replayed endlessly. The hum filled the chamber, vibrating marrow. From the center of the floor rose a colossal lens larger than the fountains, its glow pure white, now not red. It tilted slowly, its aperture opening, swallowing the chamber in its gaze. The voice emerged steady and final. Assimilation complete. You are not witness, you are archive. David staggered backward, palms raised in denial. His throat cracked, voice raw. No, I'm still here, I'm still me. But the screens disagreed. Each replayed him, shouting the same words seconds earlier. His protest was already past tense, already consumed. The chamber mocked him with loops of his defiance. He wasn't living his rebellion, he was watching it replayed. The colossal lens opened wider, its glow flooding the chamber. The light burned through his skin, piercing bone, dissolving thought. His memories unraveled, each moment stripped from him and plastered across the walls. He saw himself at 5 years old, whispering to the dark. He saw himself sprinting from headlights. He saw himself kneeling in the church, screaming at the mannequins. Every instant displayed, dissected, catalogued. His voice broke into sobs. Stop, please. The chamber echoed back, the plea multiplied, endless. His despair had become chorus, his identity fractured into copies. The lens pulsed brighter. He felt himself thinning, dissolving, becoming nothing more than another replay. And yet a thought sparked, faint but defiant. If every frame was archived, then perhaps erasure was impossible. But corruption might still be possible. His cracked lips curled into a desperate whisper. If I am archived, then I can rot you from inside. The colossal lens froze. For the first time, silence reigned. The colossal lens loomed above David, its white glow spilling across the chamber. The walls of screens flickered, each replaying fragments of his life, every moment preserved in merciless clarity. Yet when he whispered his defiance, if I am archived, then I can rot you from inside, the system paused. The endless hum faltered, static, cutting through its rhythm. David pushed himself upright, trembling, drenched in light. His chest heaved, but his voice steadied. Memory fades. I will not be your subject. I will be your infection. The screen's spasmed frames freezing mid-motion. His image fractured into distorted blocks. Shutters clicked violently within the walls, capturing a moment that no longer matched reality. The archive was confused. He staggered forward, pressing his palm against one of the screens. It showed him seconds earlier, pleading broken. He smiled, a sharp, unsettling grin that did not match the loop. The dissonance rippled outward. Screens along the wall glitched, scrambling between images. Some froze. Others played scenes of strangers he did not know, faces torn from different files. The voice roared, layered with distortion. Corruption is forbidden. David slammed his fists into the screen. So archive it. Record me breaking you. He twisted his expression deliberately, baring his teeth, contorting his face into grotesque shapes that no longer aligned with the fear they wanted. His laughter echoed hollow and jagged, rattling through the chamber. The screen scrambled faster. Loops broke. Footage stuttered into nonsense. The colossal lens adjusted frantically, aperture widening and narrowing in chaotic rhythm. The glow strobed, no longer steady, as if trying to stabilize. The chamber itself shook, dust raining from unseen rafters. David threw himself against another screen, smashing it with his shoulder. The glass spidered with cracks, but more importantly, the footage inside collapsed into static. Instantly, nearby screens flickered with corruption, their images bleeding into noise. He screamed through ragged breaths. You can't archive chaos. You can't preserve what won't hold. The voice returned, frantic, now broken into fragments. You are anomaly. Resolution required. Erasure. Static cut it off. The colossal lens glowed hotter, the light searing his skin. A final surge, desperate, blinding, poured over him. The chamber became an inferno of white, every screen blasting with light, every loop accelerating. For a moment, he saw thousands of victims screaming in unison, their loops collapsing into chaos, their recordings unraveling. He pressed his hands to his face, laughter bubbling through terror. His voice rose against the storm of static. If I'm yours, then you'll choke on me. The lens shuddered. Cracks split across its surface, its white glow fractured into jagged beams. The walls trembled violently, screens popping in bursts of sparks. Footage spilled uncontrolled faces, overlapping voices, colliding memories bleeding into one another. The archive was losing cohesion. David staggered to the chamber's center, illuminated by chaos. The colossal lens tilted downward, one final attempt to capture him cleanly. Its aperture opened wide, desperate. He stared into it, defiant, grinning, shaking. Go ahead, record this. He hurled himself forward, straight into the burning eye. The impact shattered glass shards exploding in radiant storm. White light swallowed everything, and for one instant the archive screamed. Not the victims, not the voices of the past, the archive itself. A howl of collapsing order, a machine realizing it could no longer contain what it had created. Then silence. David floated weightless in blackness. No screens, no mannequins, no red shards, just endless dark. His chest rose and fell, his body still existed. But whether he had destroyed the archive or become part of its corruption, he could not tell. Darkness stretched in every direction, silent and immeasurable. David drifted weightless, his body suspended in nothingness. The roaring hum of the archive was gone. No shutters clicked. No voices whispered. His lungs rose and fell steadily, each breath echoing louder than it should. For the first time since the nightmare began, he felt alone. Yet the silence was not comfort. It was vacancy, an absence that felt staged. He turned slowly, searching for walls, for light, for evidence of survival. His hands brushed emptiness. His reflection did not appear. No red dots blinked. But unease spread through him like frost. If the archive truly fell, where was he? If he had become corruption, what was left to corrupt? He whispered into the void, his voice hollow. Am I free? No reply came. Only silence, stretching and endless. For long minutes he drifted, hope clawing at despair. Perhaps he had broken them. Perhaps the shards were gone, scattered into decay. Perhaps humanity was safe. The thought soothed for a breath, then cracked under its own weight. Because hope itself could be staged. Relief could be archived. Even solitude could be another frame. He closed his eyes, but when lids shut, images flashed behind them. His childhood room, the farmhouse, the mannequins in the church, the fountain lens splitting open. Every memory replayed in pristine detail, unbroken by blur or fade. Too perfect, too sharp, not memory footage. His stomach twisted. He whispered again, weaker. You're still here. A faint sound drifted through the void. Not words. A click. A single shutter. Then another. A third. Slow, deliberate, patient. His chest froze, breath caught. The darkness pulsed faintly, with each sound as though illuminated from within. He spun desperate, but saw nothing. The clicks continued closer, now overlapping. The void filled with them until silence was gone. His own body trembled under invisible flashes as though photographed by unseen hands. Then a glow appeared ahead, small pulsing red. One shard hovered into view, silent except for its steady blink. Then another appeared beside it, and another. Dozens, hundreds. They drifted from the black surrounding him, forming a constellation of red dots in the void. His throat closed. The archive had not been destroyed. It had adapted. Freed from sets, freed from towns, freed even from machines, it now lived in pure darkness, untethered, infinite. The shards pulsed in rhythm, and for the first time no voice spoke, no commands, no instructions. Only the patient click of lenses, eternal, tireless. David realized with collapsing dread words were unnecessary now. His corruption had not killed the archive, it had made it silent. A silence that recorded endlessly without need for explanation. His body sagged. He whispered the final truth. There is no end. The shutters answered one after another, sealing his words into permanence. The void pulsed red once more, then consumed him completely. And somewhere beyond, above a quiet town where the storm had cleared, a faint red dot blinked in a child's bedroom. A lens no bigger than a fingernail, pulsing patiently in the dark.